Hello, this is Jed Morgan and welcome to the fourth in this series of WebExes for the installation and configuration of the IQPBX. We've discussed hardware, architecture, overview of the system, and we've been into some basic settings for the system ready for configuring for customers' requirements. Okay, we've discussed creating our extension range in options. In this heading, where we created our user extension range, and now we want to create the extensions, and we're going to look at the extensions heading, phone provisioning heading, and we're also going to look at DHCP server heading down here in network settings, so DHCP server settings. So what we'll do is we'll look at the DHCP server settings first. We can create our range of IP addresses that are going to be dispensed by the system, by the IQPBX. We created our LAN settings for the system here in this heading. These were the LAN settings for our system, and now we want to tell the system that it's going to be a DHCP server for any of the phones that we're going to connect to it. So what we do here is we enable DHCP, enter the details for the system, and create an IP address range. So here I created a range of 192.168.5.2 to 192.168.5.50, and also added our NTP server here. That can be your external NTP server, or you could even use the phone system itself as an NTP server for the phones. Once you've created your parameters here, your DHCP IP range, save the details, apply changes, and we are now ready for the system to give out IP addresses to the phones as we plug them into the network. So what we'll do then is we'll look at extensions. We'll see that our extension range has been created for us for the ones that we want to create. You get 5 created in default. Default would be 500 to 504. We can add individual ones, as 505 was added individually, and then we can create a block of extensions, 200 to 204, created another 5 via the option buttons here, add an extension or add bulk extensions, and as long as they're within the range set in the options before for extension number range, then they'll be added into this configuration box and displayed. And we can go to any of the extensions and edit any of the parameters for the extensions via this box here. So we can edit the parameters for an extension, or we can delete an extension from here as well. This box above is for analog extensions. They're created and fixed. So the extension is 601, they're fixed, but we can edit the parameters for that extension just the same way as the SIP extensions. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll look at the our SIP endpoint extensions and create some parameters and then check the parameters for these. So we'll pick an extension, a Yealink extension, look at 500, and for the Yealinks we can set certain things in the parameter box here. For example, the password needs to be 6 digits or characters. This can be a mixture of characters and digits. I strongly suggest you change this to a strong password. This is for registration of the SIP endpoint onto the system. Name for the extension, so this can be a name, Joe Blogs, can be an extension number, that's fine. Caller ID, whatever's entered into this box here will be displayed to another internal user if called by extension 500. So if 500 calls a colleague, whatever's in this box will appear on the display of the called extension. Enable voicemail or disable voicemail. Voicemail access PIN number. When you enter voicemail, enter the PIN number here. Again, I suggest this is a strong password. Stronger the better. And you'll be into your voicemail. Voicemail to email. This is not checked in default. If you wish to check this and you've got an SMTP server created and up and working, you can enable send voicemail to email, enter the email address of the user, and all messages received into voicemail will be sent as a WAV file attachment via email to the user. Pickup groups. Drop down the box and select which group you want this extension to be in. Also applies when using paging. For the phones, they must be in a pickup group or the paging doesn't work. Follow me, simply call forward. You can set this at the currently in default it's set to no answer and busy, so if no reply or busy, the call transfers to voicemail. You can change this to a number, and that can be another internal user, can be an IVR, it can be a ring group, it can be an external number. So prefixed with a 9 if it's an external number, enter the details into this box, save the parameters, and the calls would divert on no answer or busy to an external number. But please bear in mind the number of concurrent calls. It's quite important you remember this this detail, especially if you're using an external number here. It would become 2 concurrent calls. You can set this to always and uncheck the other 2, and then you've got always to a number or always to voicemail. So we have options for voicemail settings there, or follow me, call forward. Call waiting, we can implement a call waiting yes or call waiting no. Do not disturb for the extension can be set here. User web interface, we can actually web browse and log on to a user's voicemail box and extension settings. Much the same way as we logged into the system as service and admin, we do the same thing here, and this allows us to come in as a user. So I can demonstrate this. I just cancel this. If I log out from the system programming, I can log out, and I can log back in as extension 500. My password for the voicemail box, this is the password for the voicemail box, which in our case was 500. We can log in and we can see any voicemails that we have. If we've pressed *1 to record any phone calls that have been a bit abusive or wanted to record for any purposes, for training, etc., they will show here. Voicemail settings, we can check our voicemail options here, even our password we can change. We can change the email address for voicemail to email, and change our options for voicemail and voicemail to email. If we look at settings, we can change our settings. Even our call forward, we can change our call forward here, and call waiting options and do not disturb, and our mobility extension number. Okay, so parameters we can change when we're logged on as an extension user. So we cancel, log out. So if we wish to allow that feature, then we have the option flagged for checking in via the web, via web browser. So we'll log back in. And go back to our parameters. Here, user web interface. Ring out time is the number of seconds the device will ring. Spy mode, intrusion, barge, however you wish to term it. Spy settings, allow being spied or not. Spy modes, normal spy, where a supervisor or an extension can listen into another extension, just listen in. Whisper spies, where they can actually speak to the agent or the other extension without the caller, incoming caller, hearing. And barge spies, where they join the conversation. We look at optional settings. We have a couple of optional settings here to do with the VoIP side, where we can change the NAT settings, the NAT traverse settings. We can enable IP restriction, and if we enable IP restriction, we can input IP addresses and subnet masks in here, and only those details entered will be allowed to register as this extension. So useful for a remote worker or a hot desking, etc. Enable mobility extension. Now, mobility extension is simply a way of, when you call in from your mobile phone, you would enter your mobile phone details in here. Mobile phone details in there. Save the details, and when this is activated, when you call in from your mobile phone this number, the system will recognize your number and give you dial tone back again. So that will enable you to call a user or a colleague internally, and your extension number or name will appear on their phone, or you can dial 9 or trunk access and route a call out through the system as though you're in the office. Okay, so that's simple mobility extension. It is not true mobility twinning. It is not mobile twinning where we can have the mobile phone ringing or the other device ringing at the same time as your desk phone. So it's not quite that. It is in the roadmap. Hopefully be with us very shortly, and that will be another added feature. But for now we have just mobility extension. Save the parameters for your extension details. Apply changes. Parameters are saved for that extension. You do the same for each of your other extensions. Save the parameters, apply changes, and that's your extensions ready to go. We can then look at phone provisioning. We'll look at phone provisioning. Phone provisioning, this is a way where certain manufacturer phones, when they're plugged into our system and they're set to DHCP, and our system is set to DHCP, they're plugged into the network, and the phone system will scan. If we do a refresh on this here, if we do a refresh here, the system looks across and see if it sees any IP addresses, looks across this little network and finds any IP addresses. Or we can use this refresh icon down here, and the system will go off and do a full search across the network and find any relevant or recognizable MAC addresses in order for it to auto provision them. What we'll do, it just takes a few seconds to search through, and what happens is when it's completed its search, it finds the MAC addresses of recognizable devices and inserts them in the non-configured phone section here. And what we do then is, this is an example, it's found 3 Astra phones that are on the network, and you click on a MAC address. Now this MAC address will be a device on a desk, it'll be a phone, etc. And what we do is give this a name. So this would be could be extension 203, for example. Drop down the phone type, so the recognizable phone types for the Astra phones will be labeled here. If it's a model phone that has not been listed in here, but it's an Astra SIP endpoint, you can try a model that's close to it. You can try a model that's closest to it, and it may still pick up the extension and auto provision it for you. So in this case we'll select 6757, activate the line. Which extension do we want it to be? 203. Once that's done, you can click save, or with the Astra phones we can select the soft keys configuration. We can actually configure soft keys from here, same as we can with the Yelinks. I'll show that in a second. So we can check the key, insert which type of key we want it to be. It can be a BLF or a transfer key, it can be a directory key. So select the option you wish it to be, or simply a BLF key. A label would be an extension number, so 500. Its value would be 500 if we wanted to look at 500, and the line we could leave it at global in this case for the Astro, or you could select 1. We can leave that at global. When you've configured all your keys, your programming keys, save the details, and the system will tell you that the phone will go off on reboot and come back and be registered. So we'll register that key, and what happens that we'll register that phone, and what happens then is the phone will move from the non-configured box up to the configured box as 203. Now, what we can do, and a very useful feature, is if we wish to check the line status, this option here at the very top of the menu structure, if you click on line status at any time during your configuration, we can look up here and we can see the status of the phones on the system currently. 203 won't be registered as yet because that's simply rebooting and reconfiguring itself, but if it was registered it would show in blue. If the phone was busy on a call it would show in red, and you can see here grey is unavailable and red is ringing. So for example, if you hit the refresh icon any stage, it will refresh the screen and give you the current status. And look here below, we can see that our trunks, whether they're registered, registration's OK, and tells us that the BRI module we've got installed is OK. So it lists the trunks that we've installed, and it lists the extensions we've installed and gives them the status. So that's line status, very useful feature. So for example, if you want to reboot the system and you don't know whether everybody's on the phone or not, or whether they're busy, just check on line status, and if they're all blue you can reboot the phone system. Okay, so phone provisioning. MAC address is found. Click on the MAC address, enter the details for the extension. It's usually the extension number and the password, or just the extension number, and activate the account. Phone reboots, comes back as registered. I want to look at 500 because I want to explain something about the one of the Yealink models, the VP530, which is a touchscreen video phone. This video phone currently is on a different release of firmware. We're waiting for a new release of firmware where we'll actually auto provision completely. At the moment, the touchscreen video phone, the VP530, just needs a manual change in the actual phone itself. So you can either do that change via the handset, programming via the handset, pressing the keys, the menu keys, and going in via the handset on the phone, or you can web browse to the phone and make the changes, and I'll show you that in a second or two. So again, we look on the auto provisioning. This is the setup box for the VP530 or a Yealink, and what we can do here at the bottom here, we can actually program the memory keys and the line keys for any Yealink phones that are on the system, so you don't have to do it on the phone. You simply program the keys via this phone provisioning menu. So great interaction with the Yealinks and the phone provisioning, the manufacturers that we do support, and we can configure certain things with the keys, etc., and the registration of the phone. That's auto provisioning. As I said, in some cases you do need to web browse to a phone or simply make some changes manually on any SIP endpoint. So any SIP endpoint, even if it's not one that's approved, can be configured manually by the phone, and they have all sorts of settings that you can change in there. So for an example, we can web browse to a phone. This is a VP530 phone. So we web browse to the phone, and this is where we can set up the account details, make the change in here. So you would disable the account, So you disable the account first, because they don't auto provision completely, and then take out the password and put the password back in, enable the account, and then at the bottom of the menu confirm. The phone will go off and reboot and come back on, and it will be registered. So as you can see, if you web browse to any SIP endpoint, and this is different manufacturers, you can web browse to any manufacturer's phone and make changes for the network. We can look at advanced settings. SIP phones are really much of muchness, where very similar settings are available on all SIP endpoints. So some manual configuration may be needed on some phones, whether it be time and date, account, the DSS keys. You can change the DSS keys. We can look at the phone settings. Make the necessary changes. Look at manual time. We can enable manual time and date if you wish to be set to a manual time and date, where we can set the time and date via the menu on the phone, or simply leave it as disabled, and we'll use the DHCP timer. Okay, so SIP endpoints, extensions, registrations and setup, all done. What we want to look at finally on this section, on this WebEx, is I want to look at feature codes. Feature codes, they're going to be used by the extensions to do certain things for the system, and click on feature codes, and we can see here the options available, and we can check or uncheck them so they're available or unavailable, and we can actually change the code itself. We can actually change this code to whatever would suit your setup. Always use a star to activate the feature though. I would always use a star key. Totally flexible for using features on the system. So that's where we can change and look at feature codes, what they do. If you're stuck on what actually means, hover over the blue icon again and it will indicate what that menu refers to. Okay, extensions, setup, configuration, provisioning, all covered. I'm going to end this WebEx here, and I'll come back with the next one, and we'll look at trunks, outbound and inbound routes. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks a lot.